Have you ever felt like there's an invisible wall between you and God, blocking the very blessings you've been desperately praying for? Perhaps you've spent years reaching outward, sending prayers into what feels like an empty void, wondering why divine energy seems to flow freely into others' lives, but somehow bypasses yours completely. What if I told you that the greatest spiritual misunderstanding of our time isn't about what you're doing wrong, but about where you've been looking? This fundamental misconception has kept countless sincere spiritual seekers trapped in a cycle of frustration, constantly straining to connect with a divine presence they believe exists somewhere out there beyond their reach. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, relationship breakdown, or financial emergency, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging for divine intervention, yet feeling that heavenly assistance remains frustratingly unavailable. You're not alone. This experience is nearly universal because we've been taught to look in the wrong direction entirely. The revolutionary understanding I'm about to share with you today doesn't just transform your prayer practice, it completely reimagines your relationship with divine energy and how it flows through every aspect of your daily life. The divine flow you've been seeking isn't blocked by some cosmic gatekeeper requiring the perfect passwords or rituals. It's blocked by a single misperception about where God actually is. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with spiritual practice. When you truly grasp that divine presence isn't something external you need to strain toward, but rather the very essence of your being waiting to be recognized, everything changes. Prayer transforms from desperate pleading to joyful acknowledgement of what already exists within you. Imagine approaching each day not as a separate entity struggling through life alone, but as a living channel through which divine energy naturally flows. Picture facing challenges not with fear and anxiety, but with an unshakable awareness that you can remove the internal blockages preventing divine intelligence from solving problems through you. This isn't positive thinking or wishful spirituality. It's practical mysticism that produces tangible transformation in your health, relationships, finances, and inner peace. The 5 steps I'll be sharing today have changed countless lives worldwide, not through magical formulas, but through a profound shift in spiritual understanding. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to convince an external deity to send blessings your way, and instead focused on removing the internal barriers that have been blocking the divine flow that has always existed within you? Perfect and complete. If these teachings on removing blocks to divine flow resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. Each new video explores practical ways to experience the divine presence within. In these moments when divine energy seems most distant, the transformative journey begins with what Joel Goldsmith called the practice of the presence. A deceptively simple exercise that creates profound ripples throughout your consciousness. This isn't some complex meditation technique requiring hours of silence in perfect lotus position. It begins with a moment of recognition when you first wake up each morning, before your feet even touch the floor, before your mind becomes entangled in the day's demands. Pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, the kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine flow is my true nature. This tiny decision creates a foundation that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. The hidden revelation most spiritual seekers miss completely is that consistency matters far more than intensity. A brief moment of recognition practiced regularly throughout your day has infinitely more impact than occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a flood. Throughout your day, especially during moments of stress or challenge, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the moments when the practice reveals its transformative power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond external appearances. You'll begin noticing subtle shifts at first, a deeper peace in formerly stressful situations, unexpected solutions to persistent problems, a growing sense of guidance in daily decisions. These are signs that you're beginning to remove the internal barriers blocking divine flow. The transformations unfold gradually, but their cumulative impact completely reimagines your life experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this understanding applies to specific challenges we all face. Consider health issues, an area where fear can instantly overwhelm our spiritual awareness. When physical symptoms appear, our conditioned response is immediate panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. The breakthrough insight isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual understanding and appropriate action. When facing health challenges, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness, only divine perfection. This recognition doesn't replace medical care, but opens a channel for healing power that transcends material limitations. From this place of spiritual awareness, you can then make decisions about treatment with clarity rather than fear. Think about someone diagnosed with a chronic condition who's been told they'll simply have to manage symptoms indefinitely. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole, regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for healing that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. You don't ignore symptoms or avoid doctors. You simply bring a different consciousness to the situation. You address physical needs while maintaining awareness of spiritual wholeness. If you've experienced even momentary glimpses where you sense there's more to reality than what appears on the physical surface, write in the comments, "I recognize the wholeness within." This understanding extends far beyond personal healing. The same profound shift in consciousness transforms our relationship with money and material supply. When confronting financial challenges, most people immediately focus on external actions, working harder, cutting expenses, or frantically searching for new income sources. While practical steps matter, the mindset behind those actions determines their effectiveness. The breakthrough insight is returning to the consciousness of the inner kingdom, where divine supply is infinite and eternally flowing. Let me share something from behind the scenes of financial transformation. A businessman I worked with faced complete financial ruin after his partner embezzled company funds. Creditors were demanding payment, legal troubles multiplied daily, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Rather than focusing solely on these external circumstances, he began practicing kingdom consciousness each morning and throughout his day. At first, nothing external changed. Bills still arrived, creditors still called, but something shifted internally. The paralyzing fear that had blocked creative solutions began dissolving. From this awareness, right action emerged naturally. He found himself making different decisions, having conversations he would have avoided before, exploring options that fear would have previously ruled out. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that he couldn't have engineered through external manipulation. A former client offered a substantial new contract. An unexpected settlement came through. A strategic partnership materialized. These weren't random coincidences, but consciousness demonstrating its own abundance. The pathway to complete financial recovery opened up not through force or struggle, but through spiritual recognition. This journey of transformation requires something many modern seekers resist: patience. In our world of instant results, we expect immediate spiritual breakthroughs. The hidden truth is that this transformation develops gradually over weeks and months of practice. You won't master this understanding overnight, and that's perfectly natural. Joel Goldsmith himself spent years developing this consciousness through meditation, study, and practical application. What matters is that you begin today with whatever level of understanding you currently possess. The consistency of your practice matters far more than its initial perfection. Some days you'll maintain kingdom consciousness beautifully. Other days you'll forget completely and spend hours in anxiety before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Consider how a child learns to walk. There are many falls for each successful step at first, yet with persistence, walking eventually becomes effortless. The same principle applies to spiritual awareness. Each time you return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting, you're strengthening that awareness. The path isn't linear, it includes plateaus and even apparent setbacks. But the overall trajectory moves toward increasing spiritual recognition. The profound impact comes in recognizing that you aren't creating this kingdom through positive thinking or willpower. You're simply recognizing what has always existed within you, waiting for your awareness. This revelation transforms spiritual practice from effortful self-improvement to joyful discovery of your true nature. If you've ever experienced the frustration of spiritual growth seeming too slow or inconsistent, write in the comments, "I'm embracing divine timing." The beauty of this practice becomes even more evident when we learn to recognize the subtle transformations that signal our growing awareness. While our mindset often looks for dramatic breakthroughs or miraculous interventions, the true revelations come in quieter moments. As you practice returning to kingdom consciousness, notice the subtle shifts occurring within your daily experience. First, a deeper peace in situations that would have previously triggered stress or anxiety. Then, unexpected solutions appearing for persistent problems that seemed unsolvable from purely material thinking. And perhaps most profound, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These might seem like small changes, but they represent a fundamental shift in your inner landscape. You're beginning to live from kingdom consciousness rather than purely from material awareness. It's like learning to see with entirely new eyes. The world hasn't changed, but your perception of it has transformed completely. Where you once saw only problems, you now recognize opportunities. Where you once felt separation from good, you now experience divine presence. A woman in our community described this shift beautifully. After practicing kingdom consciousness for several months, she realized one day that her constant anxiety about the future had been replaced by a quiet confidence. Not because her external circumstances were more secure, they weren't, but because her awareness of the inner kingdom had become more consistent. This didn't mean she never experienced fear or worry again, but those emotions no longer dominated her consciousness or dictated her decisions. The secret pathway to experiencing these subtle shifts is persistence through the initial challenges. This is precisely where many spiritual seekers stumble on their journey. They begin this practice with enthusiasm, expecting immediate dramatic results, perhaps a miraculous healing or sudden financial windfall. When those instant miracles don't materialize, they conclude the approach doesn't work and abandon it. prematurely, returning to the familiar but limiting material consciousness. The critical insight is understanding that spiritual development follows natural laws just as physical growth does. Think about planting a garden. When you place seeds in soil, nothing visible happens immediately. For days or even weeks, you see no evidence of growth. If you grew impatient and dug up the seeds to check on them, you'd interrupt the very process you're trying to foster. Spiritual practice works similarly. The initial work happens beneath the surface of your awareness, creating a foundation for visible transformation that appears in divine timing. Those who persist through this initial phase discover something far more valuable than instant gratification, an inner resource that sustains them through everything life brings. They develop a spiritual resilience that isn't dependent on circumstances being perfect. Subscribe now to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. We're dedicated to translating these profound mystical insights into practical steps you can apply immediately in your relationships, work, and inner peace. A businessman shared with me that after 6 months of consistent practice, he faced a crisis that would have previously sent him into panic and despair. Instead, he found himself responding from kingdom consciousness automatically without the effort it had required earlier in his journey. The practice that had once seemed difficult had become his natural state. This represents the maturation of spiritual awareness. What begins as conscious effort gradually becomes spontaneous expression. If you're committed to discovering the kingdom within, regardless of how long it takes, write in the comments, "I'm in this for the long journey." Now, I want to explore perhaps the most profound transformation that occurs when we remove the barriers to divine flow, the way it completely reimagines our relationships with others. Think about the people who challenge you most, that co-worker who constantly criticizes, the family member who triggers old wounds, or the stranger who cuts you off in traffic. Our instinctive reaction is defensiveness, judgment, or withdrawal. But kingdom consciousness offers an entirely different pathway when interacting with difficult people. The breakthrough insight is recognizing that the divine presence exists within them too, perfect even when obscured by stress, fear, or fatigue. Their behavior may not reflect this spiritual reality, but that doesn't diminish its truth. This recognition isn't about excusing harmful actions, but about seeing beyond the surface to the deeper reality. Imagine returning home after a challenging day to find your partner irritable and distant. From material consciousness, you'd likely react defensively or withdraw emotionally. But from kingdom consciousness, you recognize that they're dealing with their own challenges, that the divine presence within them remains perfect even when obscured. This recognition allows you to respond with compassion rather than escalating the tension. I witnessed this transformation in a corporate environment where 2 executives had been locked in conflict for months. After one began practicing kingdom consciousness, the entire dynamic shifted. Rather than reacting to perceived attacks, she began seeing her colleague through spiritual eyes, recognizing the pressure he was under and the divine intelligence operating even through his challenging personality. Without a single conversation about their conflict, the relationship transformed as her perception shifted. The revelation many spiritual seekers miss is that living from kingdom consciousness doesn't mean escaping daily challenges, but meeting them from a spiritual foundation. This isn't about floating above human experience in some mystical bubble. It's about engaging fully with life's complexities while maintaining awareness of the spiritual dimension behind all appearances. This journey includes both successes and setbacks. Some days you'll maintain spiritual awareness beautifully throughout challenges. Other days you'll fail completely and spend hours in anxiety or anger before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Behind the scenes of spiritual growth, each return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting builds neural pathways that make this awareness increasingly natural. What initially requires conscious effort gradually becomes your default perspective. The businessman who once struggled to maintain spiritual awareness for even minutes eventually finds it becoming his natural state throughout the day. The decision to practice kingdom consciousness transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for spiritual recognition. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on divine presence. Traffic delays offer space for inner communion. Challenging conversations become invitations to see beyond appearances to the spiritual reality within others. Life itself becomes your spiritual practice, an ongoing opportunity to remove the barriers that block divine flow. The beauty of this approach is how it infuses even the most mundane activities with profound meaning. That stack of paperwork on your desk? No longer just tedious tasks, but opportunities to express divine order and intelligence. The grocery shopping. Not just errands, but a chance to recognize abundance flowing through every aspect of your experience. If you've experienced those moments when spiritual awareness suddenly breaks through in the midst of ordinary activities, write in the comments, "I recognize divinity in the everyday." The true beauty of this practice emerges when we observe how it gradually transforms our entire experience of life. Over months and years of dedicated practice, something truly profound begins to shift in your awareness. The kingdom consciousness that once required deliberate effort becomes increasingly natural, like learning a language that eventually allows you to think in it, rather than mentally translating every phrase. You'll notice that you automatically return to spiritual truth more quickly after being momentarily pulled into material fear or concern. This isn't something you force. It's the natural evolution of consistent spiritual recognition. Think of it as building momentum on a journey. Those initial steps require the most energy, but as you continue forward, you develop a rhythm that carries you naturally. A friend described this experience beautifully, saying that after a year of practice, she realized her first thought in challenging situations had shifted from panic to peace. Not because she was trying to be spiritual, but because kingdom consciousness had become her default perspective. The evidence of this transformation appears in practical ways throughout your life. Solutions to problems appear more readily because you're accessing the infinite intelligence of the kingdom within, rather than relying solely on limited personal thinking. Peace becomes more consistent because it's anchored in spiritual reality rather than fluctuating circumstances. Relationships deepen because you're interacting from authentic spiritual awareness rather than ego needs and defenses. The hidden revelation that transforms this journey is letting go of expectations for immediate dramatic results. Our culture conditions us to expect instant transformation, the spiritual equivalent of before and after photos on a weight loss program. But consciousness doesn't transform that way. The changes unfold organically, often so subtly that you don't notice them happening in real time. You may not even recognize the cumulative effect until you look back after 6 months or a year and realize how profoundly different your life has become. One of the most remarkable transformations occurs in your professional life. As kingdom consciousness becomes your natural state, work shifts from being merely a means of survival to an authentic expression of divine creativity flowing through you. This isn't just a nice spiritual idea. It manifests in tangible ways that transform your entire relationship with your career or business. A designer in our community described this shift beautifully. Where she once struggled for inspiration, constantly fighting creative blocks and deadline pressure, she now experiences a natural flow of ideas because she's tapped into infinite intelligence rather than relying solely on personal ability. Her work became not just more productive, but more fulfilling, an expression of spiritual essence rather than ego achievement. The behind-the-scenes revelation is how this consciousness transforms your relationship with challenges. Obstacles that would have previously overwhelmed you begin to feel like interesting puzzles to solve from spiritual awareness. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety now becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult client interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to recognize the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. If you've started to notice your work becoming more of an authentic expression of something greater than yourself, write in the comments, "I'm becoming a clear channel." Now, I want to go even deeper into what may be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of removing the barriers to divine flow. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypass. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. This peace becomes your foundation through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. A woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response, not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing beyond intellectual understanding that the kingdom of heaven within had proven itself faithful through the darkest experience of her life. This wasn't resignation or spiritual bypassing, but direct experience of spiritual reality, transcending even death itself. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from conceptual knowledge to lived reality. You know from direct experience that spiritual consciousness is the only reliable foundation because you've tested it through real-life challenges. Material conditions fluctuate constantly, but inner truth remains eternally steady. This doesn't make you immune to human emotion, but provides a deeper context for those emotions, like waves on the surface of an ocean that remains undisturbed in its depths. Let's be honest about what this path truly requires. The transformation we're discussing demands a level of commitment that most spiritual seekers are unwilling to make. This isn't a weekend workshop or a 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. It requires daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate results. Faith in spiritual truth when material appearances seem to contradict it completely. And patience through the sometimes painfully gradual development process. Joel Goldsmith taught this path to thousands of students worldwide throughout his ministry. Some experienced dramatic breakthroughs within months. Others worked diligently for years before significant changes appeared visibly in their experience. A few grew impatient and abandoned the practice when immediate miracles failed to materialize. The decisive factor wasn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. This commitment represents a fundamental paradigm shift in our approach to spiritual growth. Our culture has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in every area of life, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revelation that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. If you've experienced that profound peace that transcends understanding, even briefly during a difficult time, Write in the comments, "I've felt the kingdom's steadiness," the profound insight that stands at this crossroads of your spiritual journey is that you can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special spiritual credentials or decades of study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there. It will always be there. Your recognition doesn't create it, but simply reveals what already exists eternally. This is perhaps the most liberating revelation of all. The divine flow isn't blocked by your lack of knowledge or spiritual achievement. It's only blocked by a misperception about where God actually is. The transformation begins with a single moment of recognition. The kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. Spiritual perfection exists in consciousness regardless of material appearances. Simply start today, this moment, by recognizing as often as you remember this fundamental truth. Practice this recognition in the morning, throughout challenges, before sleep. Be patient with yourself through the inevitable inconsistency. Celebrate small victories. Learn from temporary setbacks. What makes this approach uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to change who you are or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. It simply invites you to recognize your true nature that has always existed beneath the surface of material appearances. Every time you turn within to acknowledge this spiritual truth, you're removing another layer of illusion that has kept you imprisoned in limitation and fear. The barriers to divine flow begin dissolving naturally through consistent recognition rather than through spiritual force or willpower. This isn't about creating something new, but unveiling what has always been there. The journey of awakening to kingdom consciousness doesn't happen in isolation. As your awareness deepens, it naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives. Around you, spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. As the barriers to divine flow dissolve in your consciousness, you naturally become a clearer channel for this truth to reach others. This sharing rarely happens through preaching or persuasion. It occurs organically through your transformed presence. People notice the difference in how you respond to challenges, the peace you maintain in chaos, the compassion you extend. Where judgment once dominated, they're drawn to something they sense in you that they intuitively recognize as authentic. A business executive described how, after practicing kingdom consciousness for nearly 2 years, his entire leadership style transformed. Where he once led through force and fear, he now inspired through spiritual presence. His decisions emerged from inner listening rather than external pressure. Team members didn't necessarily know the source of this transformation, but they responded to its authenticity. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from intellectually appreciating concepts to embodying them naturally in everyday interactions. You become a living demonstration that removing the barriers to divine flow creates not just personal transformation, but a ripple effect of healing in all your relationships and environments. If this understanding of becoming a clear channel for divine expression resonates with something deep within you, write in the comments, "The kingdom flows through me." As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that Joel Goldsmith often emphasized. Spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. Your journey of recognizing the kingdom within doesn't happen in isolation. It ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. If these teachings have resonated with something deep within you today, I'd love to hear about your own experiences in the comments below. Simply write, "The kingdom within awakens," so I know you've journeyed with me to the end of this exploration. Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in this perspective on stopping the blockage of divine flow, consider gently tapping that like button, not for algorithms or metrics, but as a way of affirming that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a small gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. And if you're feeling called to continue this journey of spiritual discovery together, subscribe to join our growing community of seekers committed to recognizing the divine presence in everyday life. We're exploring these profound truths every week, translating mystical understanding into practical living. There's a video right here about practicing the presence throughout your day that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to maintain spiritual awareness through the specific challenges and opportunities of daily living. Until next time, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition.